Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, "Dock our pay and threaten to fire us?" Enjoy the shutdown. Disclaimers. Non-English speaker, not in the US. This happened almost 4 years ago, in my last job before going solo. I was already planning on leaving, but this incident quickening my exit, and the severance package didn't hurt either. Back in 2014, I got a job as a customer support agent for a telecommunications company. I have worked in a call center before and I went for this job for 2 reasons. 1, it was customer support, not sales, important for later, and 2, had a flexible working schedule, which I needed at the time, 4 8-hour shifts in a day. In the beginning, everything was fine. The pay was a bit more than the average, OT and holidays were paid and the working environment was good. Then, a year in, everything changed. The telecommunications company decided, for cost-cutting reasons, to outsource both customer support and sales and sold our contracts to a call center company. That brought a tsunami of changes. First, we were moved to another building in the city, much bigger, which hosted only call centers. Second, the 2 departments were merged in one. That meant that a lot of people lost their jobs, between 140 to 160. The merger also meant that the people that were left had 2 jobs to do, customer support and sales. They went for a 3-to-2 rotation. 1 week you did 3 days of CS and 2 days of sales, the next 3 days sales, 2 days CS. The only shift exempted was the night shift, thank God for nights. Third was the pay cuts. That wasn't evident at first, but it was there. They cut our hours from 8 to 6, but because we worked 8 hours, we had 2 hours OT. The commissions from sales also helped at the beginning. And finally, it brought a change of culture in the workplace. Before the merger, we were relaxed and didn't have goals or cutoff times. CS can take a lot of time, especially for changing providers. Now we had monthly sales goals and a minimum and maximum call time, minimum of 3 minutes, maximum of 10. For a year, things were kind of okay. Then the real problem started. First was the delaying of OT and bonuses payments. Then, almost all of our managers quitted and the new ones, brought over from other call centers, that were more tin tyrants than managers. Raising the targets for daily calls and sales to unrealistic targets didn't help either. We started to become a meat grinder. People were leaving and new employees didn't last long, 4 months on average. New policies were implemented that made no sense, like if you're 10 minutes or more late you had an hour of your pay docked. During that time, me and some other experienced employees were writing everything down, just in case. A couple of major incidents happened, one I described in a previous post, but the worst was about to happen. It is important to note that I live in a country that has earthquakes, usually 2 major in a year. There are certain procedures that you have to follow during an earthquake. You kind of see where this is going. The incident. It was around 1400 on a Friday of August when an earthquake happened. It was a good, long one. Most of us were on the phones at that hour. Most of us took immediate precautions. After it passed, most of us tried to follow the evaluation procedures. But the managers stopped us. They said that the phones were still working and we had to do our jobs. Most people got scared and went back to work, but me and a few others, about 10 in total, walked out. 10 minutes later, we all got a call from HR that because we walked out, our pay for the day was docked and if we didn't return, we would be fired. 15 minutes after that, the first aftershock hit, bringing down the power, forcing them to evacuate the building. Their response time was atrocious, 2 hours and 3 aftershocks. The revenge. The same afternoon, we had contacted our union and filed complaints. We spilled the beans about everything, especially the last day. On Monday, the union opens an investigation on the incident. HR and the managers tried to stonewall them, but their atrocious evacuation time during a major earthquake had caught the eye of the government agency responsible for work safety. Thanks to some helpful cops directing traffic scene, it was the last building evacuated. Along with the union being watchful already, from a previous incident, the investigation was thorough. The aftermath. The investigation brought to light all the bad practices of the company. The biggest fine was by the government, due to the evacuation failure. Adding to that was a 2-month shutdown to check the building for structural damage, which found 6 emergency exits locked. All the employees, for all the call centers, got 3 months of extra pay as compensation for being denied evacuation. Then came the labor laws violations. Everybody was paid in full for the day, plus OT, heavily inflated because it was late. The 10 of us that walked out got a severance pay in the low 5-digit scale. The call center company, having to pay the fines while having about 40% of their call centers shut down for 2 months, lost some very lucrative contracts. It managed to barely survive, until it was bought out by another call center company in 2019. Next one is titled, "Keep Wasting Police Time Over Petty Arguments? Lose Almost Half of Your Garden." Alright guys, this story is about the neighbor from hell. We will be calling him Steve, don't even know his real name. So Steve is always calling the cops over petty things. My family has lived here for approximately 7 or 8 years now, and he calls the police once every couple years. The first time was when his kids were outside around 10:30 p.m. on a Friday night and my dogs were barking because they were screaming and generally just being loud. The next time was because one of his chickens had been killed by an animal, most likely a fox or coyote or even a stray cat. He claimed that one of my dogs somehow got through the locked doggy door and escaped through the fence to eat his chicken. The responding officer asked if he saw it happen, and Steve told him that he did not, but that he just knew it was our dog, to which the officer laughed in his face. The third time was because my uncle got caught in the snow, so he reversed rather quickly and tore up some of Steve's grass in the process. A land surveyor that was court-ordered showed up and determined that not only was it not his lawn, but he had his chicken coop and half of his garden on our property. We didn't care about the chickens and garden simply because our houses are separated by a creek and the chickens and garden were located on his side of the creek. He recently called the cops again because my boyfriend was playing with a laser pointer and acting like a stormtrooper. He was not aiming it at people's homes, but it just so happened he momentarily flashed it into Steve's window. Steve came to our house and threatened my dad, getting in his face and acting like he was going to swing. Well, my family decided enough was enough. We have started building a fence. And we started right on his side of the creek. Steve heard us bright and early hammering away and came outside in his boxers and a pair of slippers. He told us he would call the cops and has us arrested for trespassing, except we were still on our property line, so my dad showed him the house plan and pointed to the pegs the surveyor put down that showed our property lines. He stood there for an hour screaming at me, my little brothers, my boyfriend, and another neighbor as we all worked until we got to his garden. He was so mad when he realized we were going to fence right on through it. He ran to move his chicken coop, though we never were going to take his chickens because pets are family. He did call the cops afterwards and they didn't even show up because it was our land and technically he was the one damaging our property. We just finished that side of the fence Sunday afternoon after a couple days of work. Now we'll have carrots, tomatoes, squash, and an abundance of strawberries as well as an apple tree that we didn't know existed and an in-ground fire pit he was using to burn trash. In addition, now his kids can't shoot pellets and BBS at us and our dogs. Take that, Steve. Next one is titled, "Just Desserts, Boss Lady. Eat it, anytime." Back in the 2010s I was living in Louisiana and going to school. I got a job at a daycare with the understanding I was training to be the assistant manager, then later the manager. They had a really high rate of turnover for a daycare, they just couldn't keep employees and didn't know why. I have a lot of experience and training in childcare and have done a lot of managerial work within the field, like maintaining supplies, creating lesson plans and activities, checking timesheets, processing payments, etc. The owner was looking to hand over a lot of the day-to-day business, so that's where I was supposed to come in. The daycare that hired me was situated between the campus and my apartment, so it was also a convenient location. I could go to and from school to work, and vice versa. It seemed like it was going to be a decent place to work. I had the 1-year-olds and I loved them to bits. It was easy to slip in the routine with the other teachers, and the kids I had took to me very quickly. About a week and I ask about the training and my boss tells me I need to hit 60 days first. Okay, no biggie. They want to make sure I'll stick around and not just use them for training, certs. So, I make it through the probationary period and there's still no mention of training. The room with the older kids always smelled like pee, but when I brought it up they just dismissed it as a kid who had problems wetting himself. All the time, apparently. The teacher was always on her phone playing games. The kids would run wild the entire time while she sat with her head down, not watching them. I brought that up, as well, and was told it wasn't my business. The infant teacher was the only one that actually seemed to care and be invested in the kids, at all. As much as that bothered me, it was also stuff I knew I could fix because I had done it before at other places. If we could ever get to the actual ducking training, that is. I get only vague answers when I ask my boss about it, and it's really starting to irk the duck out of me. I was also getting really tired of listening to my boss talk about the kids or their parents, calling one mom a slut because of how she dressed, or saying how weird this little boy in my room was. My room also shared a half wall with the kitchen, so when my boss was back there prepping breakfast or lunch I could hear everything she said. She was a newly single 55-year-old divorcee who just started to go out to clubs and drink again and pick up men. There's nothing wrong with that, I mean, get it, girl. More power to you, but please stop talking about shaving your bomb-ass cooch around my kids. She did this all the time, on the phone, to other teachers, even parents, like they wanted to hear about the grown and sexy club she found last night or how she's walking crooked from pulling a muscle in her crotch. I stuck it out thinking, okay, I can do this, she'll be gone most of the time anyway when I take over and I can implement some changes so she's not running people off with her attitude. So, one day I have a little boy, the same one she often tried to say was weird, who starts running a fever and has to go home. I call his parents and they tell me his grandparents are heading over to pick him up. He's a very quiet little boy, never makes any waves or anything. His parents are absolutely precious. His grandparents come in and are just as sweet. So, they come in my classroom while my boss is preparing lunch. She's talking to another teacher while I talk to the grandparents about his symptoms. All of a sudden we hear her talking about the little boy, how he stunk and, what else do you expect from racial slur? The boy was Middle Eastern. I am stuck somewhere between absolutely mortified and thoroughly goddamn enraged. But I also have a bunch of little kids volleying for my attention and don't want to scare them. I clear my throat as loudly as humanly ducking possible, but she keeps going, talking about the parents and how she was glad she didn't have to deal with them right now, because somebody else was picking him up. I'm apologizing profusely to the grandparents at this point. I peek my head around the corner and tell her to shut up, and then watch the couple leave with their grandson. She comes out of the kitchen and says nothing at all, just walks straight by without a word. I get the kids to sleep, and then go on my lunch break. Just as I return, I hear her on the phone in the office as soon as I walk in. She is telling the boy's parents that I was the one in the kitchen talking about him, blaming every disgusting thing she said on me. Of all the nerve, the outright unmitigated gall, who the duck does that? I was heated. I waited until the end of the day, walked in her office, and quit on the spot. I then reported a lot of the infractions and stuff I had seen that she never corrected, even though she was fully aware of the issues. Didn't think about her again, until 6 months later. I'm pulling through the Jack-in-the-Box drive-thru and I hear a familiar voice on the speaker. Nah, I think, can't be. I pull around and there my former boss is standing in the window wearing a drive-thru headset. This was funny for 2 reasons. 1, when I left she wished me luck flipping burgers, in return I wished her luck keeping the place afloat, and 2, she treated service people like absolute crap. Not enough ice in her drink? She'd call and complain. They forgot extra ketchup? Well, then she deserved free fucking food. Just an absolute Karen anytime she had the chance. I stop at the window and stare for a second. She looks straight through me at first. I gave her the money and said, "Fancy meeting you here." She never acknowledges me, so I actually wondered if she recognized me. I asked, "You don't remember me?" She put her hand on her hip and looked over the top of her glasses at me the way I had seen her do countless times when describing her sexploits from the previous night, and said, "No, should I?" Damn, I figured, she really doesn't know me? But nope, she definitely remembered, because she then threw my change, coins included, at me in my truck, and asked, "Will that be all?" Yep, honey, I'm going to feast on this moment for years. Next one is titled, Wife Thinks She's Won. I want to mention that my wife is an amazing person. I got laid off 18 months ago and she stepped up and traded roles with me. She has become the provider of this house and, let's be honest, still does more to keep the house in order than I do. I basically keep the kid alive, that's my function. Anyway, she's a saint. She does, however, have a few idiosyncrasies that really bug me. Namely chewing with her mouth open and open mouth, tongue out, no cover, coughing wherever she is. So one day I'm cooking dinner and she's standing on the other side of the island reading the news on her phone, and she starts her coughing routine on the food I'm prepping for dinner. I'm having a tough day so I can't anymore, and I say something, "Could you please not cough on dinner?" She's got to be at work for a 12-hour night shift at an animal emergency clinic, so she's not having it either and starts yelling at me about how her parents weren't around to teach her better. I add insult to injury by saying it's just like chewing with your mouth open. You're 43, and you can unlearn it. She's now super mad, so she yells, "Well, it's just like you farting. You can control that and it's disgusting." This is the first time she's mentioned this in our 5 years together, so I didn't know. So now I know that I do something that bugs her. I can't in good faith continue to do it, despite her lack of work on chewing or coughing. My petty revenge? I high-five the 2-year-old every time she farts, and we laugh when mom's asleep for work. So every time mom has a day off, the baby will run over to her, fart, laugh, and run away. Next one is titled, My ETA is Treated Like a Contract Written in a Blood? No more ETA for you. This is a story from when my husband and I weren't married yet, but were living together already. We were young, sometimes petty and headstrong. So I used to work in a city that was quite far away from where we lived, and it took around 2 hours to get there. I needed to travel by train to get there. The train system where I live, Netherlands, is quite good, but having a delay of 10 to 45 minutes once a week wasn't unusual. Me sometimes worked long days, so I usually gave my husband a heads up on the time I expected to be home. One day was another one of those bad train days where the delays compounded, and I was home an hour later. My husband was kinda pissy about it at me, which in turn pissed me off. He told me that if I tell him that I'd be home at a certain time, it was a promise and that I should keep it. I thought he was being unreasonable, because I'm no clairvoyant. So I asked him, so even if there's a small chance that some delay comes up, I shouldn't say I'll be home at a certain time? I could see some gears turning in his head, but he'd be damned if he'd admit he was wrong, so he confirmed this. So for a few weeks after that I gave the most useless ETAs ever, usually something like, I'll be home between 4 p.m. and 1 a.m. When my husband got pissy about it, I reminded him that I could never be certain of the time. After all, the train could get hit by a comet, or a national power outage could occur. And didn't he say that I shouldn't tell him a time if I wasn't certain? After a few weeks he relented and admitted he was wrong about it. Next one is titled, Forget My Birthday? Then I'll do something we said we would do together. A friend and I have met up about once a week to watch movies, series. It started a few months into COVID just so we would get some social contact. We've watched WandaVision every week, for example. When his birthday came around I asked him about 2 weeks beforehand what he wanted to do and kept bugging him until he had an answer for me. And ultimately we celebrated together. Well, my birthday was about 1 month later, and according to a mutual friend she reminded him and our other friends of my upcoming birthday. So, everyone congratulated me except that one friend. I want to clarify that this is not about the birthday per se. It's about the feeling that I'm not important enough to even write down that one date. I can't keep birthdays in mind for crap. That's what I have a calendar on my phone. To make a long story short, I watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier without him, just because I thought it was petty. We haven't met up for different reasons for a while and decided to wait until all of the episodes were out so we could watch the whole thing at once. Yeah, well, duck that. Last one is titled, Crab Legs. A few years ago I went to a nicer buffet for a friend's birthday and it happened to be crab leg night. There was a woman a few tables from us and we noticed that all she was eating was the crab legs, huge platefuls at a time. Every time we went up the crab legs were empty, but it gets worse. This woman was literally emptying the tray onto her plate even when there were people waiting behind her for some. Cue my petty revenge. I see her about to go up again so I get up, and since I'm closer I get there first. I proceed to fill up my plate as she stands behind me waiting. My friend walks up just waiting for me and I offer her crab leg while this lady audibly scoffs. I left like 3 to 4 in the tray for her, she was the only one waiting. Shot me dirty looks the rest of the night even though she got more like 5 minutes later, lol. Thanks for listening.